Hey gang, I got directed to yet another list of questions for atheists. Since the host rattles off 36 questions in less than 3 minutes, about 5 seconds a question, I get the feeling this is some kind of gish gallop. So, unless there are any complaints, I'm going to group some of the more similar questions together. And, my channel, my rules. For those that don't know, a gish gallop is a long list of questions in order to try to exhaust the responder into replying to a massive number of basic questions while making it appear that with so many questions they have a strong foundation. It basically tricks people into wasting their time responding to a laundry list of vacuous questions. So, let's get to it.
Why is there something rather than nothing?
I don't know, which is a valid answer if we don't know something. If we don't know the answer to anything, it's better to respond with honesty than to just make something up that we have no evidence for. I would rather admit my ignorance than stake a claim that has nothing to back it up.
Is there any evidence that suggests the universe is eternal?
That depends on what you consider eternal to mean. We have evidence of the Big Bang and understand the universe will eventually experience heat death, where there is no more energy and therefore nothing else can happen in the universe. So, it has what could be considered a beginning and an end, meaning it isn't eternal.
If not, why do atheists hold on to this idea and say that you have debunked the Kalam? If so, why do the vast majority of scientists reject this idea?
Because the Kalam argument is faulty reasoning. Basically it says, something created the universe so that something is God. Even if we follow the idea that something created the universe, why does it have to be an intelligent, self-aware being, and not some non-intelligent process? In other words, just because the universe started doesn't mean it was a God that started it.
Why is the universe so fine-tuned?
What do you mean by finely tuned? You have no framework for those words. I assume you mean fine-tuned for life to exist? That's what that question usually means. The vast majority of the universe is inhospitable to humans. One small planet orbiting an insignificant star happened to have the right conditions for life to exist. So, it's not surprising that life evolved on it to take best advantage of the environment around it. This is what I was talking about when discussing the gish-gallop nature of his questions. This is a question with no context, and I have no idea what they're really asking.
If your answer is the multiverse, why is there no evidence for this theory?
The multiverse is a hypothesis that doesn't have any evidence. The multiverse is a hypothesis that doesn't have any evidence for it. I've said in the past that it could be true. We have evidence that at least one universe exists, since we're in it right now. So why not multiple? It's an interesting idea that has sparked a lot of science fiction. And while it would be neat if it were true, we'll have to see what evidence can be presented before it's accepted.
Is it possible that there is no natural explanation for the origin of life?
Here's what we know. There was a point in our history where life didn't exist. Then there was life. Maybe it was put there by a god that we have no evidence for. Or it was a result of natural forces. In any event, there was something that caused the origin of life. Since, as I said, there is no evidence for God, I tend to lean towards a non-deity based explanation for the origin of life, even if we don't know exactly what it is. Although there are some hypotheses gaining traction. As I said earlier, just because we don't have an answer doesn't mean we need to slot God into the gaps of our knowledge. You could say that it's possible for God to be the answer to anything and everything. But since there is no reason to accept that there is a God, the God explanation can be just as easily dismissed as an explanation for anything.
Where does consciousness come from?
It's something we evolved. Humans are tool users, meaning our ancestors needed to understand cause and effect and the world around us. Understanding the world meant that we understood our place in it, resulting in an understanding of the self, or consciousness.
Do you lack a belief that God exists, or would you say that God does not exist?
As I've said many times before, I don't have any reason to accept the claim that a God exists. This is such a standard question, usually one of the first things atheists get asked. But stuck in the middle of the list like that? I have a feeling a gotcha is coming up.
Do you just lack a belief that Zeus exists, or do you believe that Zeus does not exist? If you just lack a belief that Zeus exists, why are you centuries behind the rest of the world who says that Zeus does not exist?
And there's the gotcha. Technically, I lack a belief that Zeus exists. Because, and this is the same for your deity, I have no evidence that he does exist. I willingly admit that while I dismiss the claims that he does, I could be wrong, and that Zeus could actually exist, and the whole imbalance of electrons thing is false, and Zeus is really the cause of lightning bolts.
My name is Zeus.
Zeus?
Yeah, Zeus, as in father of Apollo, Mount Olympus. Don't fuck with me or I'll shove a lightning bolt up your ass. Zeus!
But the fact that you, and as you put it, the rest of the world for centuries, can dismiss his existence due to lack of evidence means that you should understand how easily I can dismiss the claims of your deity for the exact same reason.
Do you act according to what you believe or what you just lack a belief in?
I act based on what I believe. I believe that people are basically decent. I believe that my family and friends care for me. I believe that people shouldn't be discriminated against based on their ethnic background, gender, who they love, or how they identify themselves. I believe that evidence is the best way to tell if something is true. And I believe that we should do what we can to make the world a better place for others. I just don't happen to believe in a deity.
What evidence is there that atheism corresponds with reality?
Well, since atheism is the lack of belief in a deity, and I've not been presented with evidence that there is one, my not accepting the claims of a deity corresponds to what I've been presented about reality. If new evidence were to come about to change my mind about reality regarding a deity, then I would have to adjust my understanding of the universe.
Is atheism a worldview?
No, it's simply saying there's no reason to accept the claims of a deity.
If not, what is your worldview?
Right now, that humanity is flying through space on a tiny hunk of rock around an insignificant star in an indifferent universe that doesn't care one whit about us. So, it's up to us to make things better for humanity, because nobody else will do it for us. And that this is the only life we have, so we should enjoy it.
What would convince you that God exists?
Evidence. But so far, none of what I've been shown has pointed to a deity. What I've been given is mostly wordplay, or we don't know how something occurred, therefore God.
Are you willing to follow the evidence, wherever it leads, even if it leads to a different understanding of how the universe works?
Yes, and I have changed my views because of evidence. As I've said in the past, I had trouble accepting evolution, so I looked at the evidence for it, found out where I was wrong, and changed my mind accordingly. And if I'm given evidence that goes against my current view of the world, such as the existence of God, or something even more unlikely, the existence of a decent Nickelback album, I'll change my mind about that too. Maybe I will. All right, let's listen to these guys.
So bad, 'cause living with me must have damn near killed you. And this is how you remind me of what I really am. This is how you remind me of what I really am. It's not like you to say sorry.
I think your town's band is slightly overrated. Now, where were we?
If Jesus rose from the dead, would you become a Christian? If you wouldn't become a Christian, why would you ever accept the fact that he rose from the dead?
If it was shown that Jesus rose from the dead as described in the Bible, after being dead for 3 straight days, I would have to reevaluate my understanding of the universe, or at least of how bodies work. To put it in context, my youngest daughter went without oxygen for about 15 minutes which effectively destroyed her brain, putting her in a coma for about a month that she never woke up from. If Jesus went 3 days without a working respiratory and circulatory system and came back able to even think, let alone hold coherent conversations with his followers, then I would have to think we need to reconsider his claims. But, so far, there is no evidence of that occurring outside of biblical stories. As for becoming a Christian, if I was given evidence that Christianity is true, yeah, I would have to look into that. As I said, I'm willing to change my mind if presented evidence. Worship of that God is up for debate, but I'll accept the fact that it exists if evidence can be shown for it.
Why do atheists keep insisting that faith is blind trust, when that's not what Christians or the Bible say?
Well, the Bible itself describes faith as the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. This seems to me to be a pretty accurate description of blind trust, faith being evidence of things you don't actually have evidence for.
Why do you want material evidence for an immaterial God?
I would like any kind of evidence for a deity. You can claim that your God is immaterial, so there'll be no evidence for it, which means that I have no reason to accept your claims about one. If you want me to believe in your deity, you need to give me some kind of reason to believe. What have you got?
Is there a purpose to life?
You mean one imposed on us? As far as I can tell, no. That's why I get to determine my own purpose, which includes being the best parent and best husband that I can possibly be, and try to enjoy the life I have right now.
If there is, by what standard do you determine that life has purpose?
I determine it because I have chosen that purpose for myself. As far as I can tell, that's all any of us can do.
If not, what is the point of listening to this video?
You know what? I do these videos, responding to others, because I enjoy it. Making these videos is a fun little hobby for me. If people are putting out claims and questions to me, I have a fun time giving my point of view to respond to them. Honestly, that's why my output has been so low lately. With everything going on, I just haven't been in the right mental space for doing this. Hoping things get better soon.
Where does morality come from?
It's a combination of nature and nurture. Humans thrive when working together, so it makes sense that we evolved the ability to care about others. We still need to be taught right and wrong, so while most people are born with the ability to care for others, we still need to be taught to care for others. In the same way, we evolved the ability to learn and understand complex ideas. We still need to be taught them.
How do you determine what is right and what is wrong?
Personally, I determine it by harm. If an action causes harm to another with no corresponding good, it's wrong. I don't like being harmed, and since I have empathy for others, I don't think they should be harmed either without sufficient good coming from it. A standard example is that stabbing somebody with a piece of metal is generally a wrong thing to do, but giving somebody a vaccine by stabbing them with a piece of metal is a good thing because it reduces harm. And, as I keep saying, if you haven't but are able to, get vaccinated.
When a lion kills a cub from another pride because that's what natural selection has raised it to do, is that morally acceptable?
In general, we don't apply human morality to non-human animals. What is unacceptable for humans to do to each other might be totally natural for animals to do. Unlike what some people say, just because some animals act in a certain way doesn't mean that humans need to act that way as well. And what does this have to do with acceptance of a deity or not?
If evolution has put a sense of morality into us to help us survive, what makes our actions better than any other animal's actions?
What do you even mean by better? I don't say that I have better morality than a lion just because I don't kill competing humans, because I don't judge non-human animals by human morality.
Is it morally acceptable for you to kill a toddler because you can no longer financially support it? Is it morally acceptable for you to kill a fetus in the womb because you could not financially support it? Is it morally acceptable to kill a baby after it's been born? How can you morally differentiate between a baby in the womb at 6 months and a baby born prematurely at 6 months?
Okay, first off, what do any of those have to do with atheism? There are atheists who support women being able to get an abortion, and there are atheists who seek to deny women control of their own bodies. Since you're asking about my thoughts on abortion, here you go. I may not like the act of abortion itself, but the woman carrying the fetus gets to decide what to do about it. Or, to quote one of the prophets,
Women's bodies are own fucking business.
once a child is born and is able to survive on their own, then the parents have an obligation to take care of it. This is why things such as the new Texas laws with the 6-week limit, or the ability for anyone to bring civil suits, basically bounties, out on anyone who assists a woman controlling her own body, terrify me. It's another step towards taking autonomy from women's bodies away from them by making it incredibly difficult to get the medical procedures they require.
Who was Jesus?
According to the Bible, he was the Son of God who died and came back, and somehow that made people's sins go away if they ask.
Why did his disciples say that he rose from the dead?
If you're referring to the disciples in the Bible, well, that's because that's what the story says they did. You might as well ask, why did the Avengers say that everybody came back after that snap? If you mean the latter-day disciples, well, that's because they were told and they believed without any evidence either.
Why does the Bible keep lining up with archaeology?
If you're writing about history, as the Bible was, then matching it up with known history will give it a more grounded context. For instance, we know that Macbeth was an actual king of Scotland, but that doesn't mean that witches, claiming to be able to read his future, pushed him into becoming king by way of murdering the royal family. Or, for a more current example, there are many historical points in LA Confidential, but that doesn't mean Elroy's story really happened. And the Bible really doesn't match up with archaeology. If you line up the reign of Herod, the local, not empire-wide census, and the supposed birth of Jesus, the timelines just don't add up. But if their goal was to tell a more compelling story to get people's interest, then it isn't surprising that they'll fudge the numbers a little bit.
Get away from our table.
Shut up. A hooker cut to look like Lana Turner is still a hooker.
Hey!
She just looks like Lana Turner.
She is Lana Turner.
What?
She is Lana Turner.
See? Great scene. Hilarious, and it made a better movie. Sure, the movie took place before Lana Turner and Johnny Stompanato got together in real life, but it makes for a more compelling scene. Again, in a fictional setting.
Why do the three bloodiest regimes in history, that being Mao's China, Nazi Germany, and Stalin's Russia, come from atheistic ideas?
First off, most of Nazi Germany were believers, mainly Protestant Christians and Catholics. They had a strong connection to the church, so let's focus on the communist ones you brought up, China and Russia. Yes, the founders of both the communist ideas and the specific communist states you mentioned were atheists, but communism, or even totalitarianism, doesn't come from atheistic ideas. You could believe in a deity and still think that property should belong to the community and not specific individuals. Seems kind of similar to from each according to their ability to each according to their needs. Atheists can have just about any political background. Well, Marx was an atheist, so was Ayn Rand. There was absolutely no direct connection between I dismiss the idea of a god with I think we should get rid of private property. One of the reasons why modern regimes have been more bloody is because, well, they're modern, and humanity keeps coming up with better and more efficient ways to murder and brutalize each other. We're a wonderful species, aren't we? If tyrants of the past had access to the technology of today, I'm sure they could have been just as brutal, possibly more so. And even if you can see the point that, yes, those bloody regimes were headed by atheists and they were bad people, that doesn't lead to, therefore, a God exists. Simply, they didn't accept the God claim, and they did terrible things. And to be fair, atheists can't use the reverse argument either, that if believers do terrible things, then a God doesn't exist. The horrible atrocities committed by theists in Nazi Germany does not prove that a deity doesn't exist either. People's behaviors, beliefs, or lack of them do not dictate the state of the universe. So there we go. Another round of questions that pretty much boil down to, you can't explain this, or atheists do terrible things, therefore my beliefs are right.
Take